I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. You know, there's something that has tempted men since the very beginning of time. It has destroyed kings, it has corrupted leaders, divided families, started wars. Yet almost every generation falls for it. Power. The desire to influence, the desire to control, the desire to make things happen, the desire to just never be weak again. And if we're honest, many men are drawn toward power because they were wounded. You know, they remember what it was like to feel powerless, to feel overlooked or be rejected, ignored, to, be vulnerable. And somewhere along the way, they made a promise to themselves: never again. See, there's this modern masculinity trap that a lot of us fall into. This is one of the reasons why so many young men are attracted to what I would call a counterfeit masculinity. The internet is full of it. Become powerful, dominant, feared, untouchable. Become the man that no one can hurt. And on the surface, some of it sounds appealing, especially if you have been hurt before, especially if you've been betrayed. Even if you've spent years feeling weak, that kind of stuff may appeal to you. But here's the problem. Most of these messages are not teaching young men how to bear God. They're just teaching men how to protect themselves. And those are very different things. Let's talk about hamartia and power for a moment. Let's come back to that word that launched this whole entire series. Hamartia, to miss the mark, to miss the target. What do you think happens when power becomes the target? Well, everything changes. Your relationships become tools. People then become assets. Conversations become opportunities. Leadership becomes control. Service becomes strategy. And before long, you've convinced yourself that you're becoming strong when you're actually just becoming self-centered. Let's have a story for a second. There was this king who forgot why he was crowned. When he first receives the crown, he genuinely wanted to help people. He wanted justice, order, protection. But over time, something changes. The throne became less about serving others and more about protecting his position. And then every decision then made was about preserving power. Now every relationship came down to loyalty. And any disagreement was an apparent threat. Eventually, he forgets why he was even given authority in the first place. We've seen this same exact story play out thousands of times in history, and it still happens today. I think this all leads back to the first temptation. One of the most fascinating moments in Scripture happens right after Jesus begins his ministry. The devil tempts him. And what is one of those temptations? Power, authority, control, the kingdoms of the world. Think about that. Satan wasn't just offering Jesus something evil looking. He was offering Jesus something that looked useful, something that looked effective, something that looked powerful. The temptation, it wasn't just power alone. It was power apart from the Father. Why is it that men crave power? Well, let's be honest about this. Most men don't crave power because they're evil. They crave power because they're afraid. They're afraid of being hurt. They're afraid of being ignored. They're afraid of being insignificant and being vulnerable. Power then feels like a form of protection, feels like safety, feels like control. But the sad part is the more you need power to feel secure, the more power then Jesus, he actually had more power than anyone. And this is what makes Jesus so extraordinary. No man in history possessed more authority in Christ. Think about it. He commanded storms. He raised the dead. He healed the sick. He cast out demons. He created the universe itself. If anyone had the right to dominate people, it was him, and yet he didn't. The night before his crucifixion, Jesus does something remarkable. He kneels down and he washes the feet of his disciples. And let that sink in. The creator of the universe washing dirty feet, not because he lacked power, but because he understood power correctly. The world thinks power exists to elevate the self. Jesus reveals that power exists to serve others. You know, there's two kinds of strength. So just imagine two men for a moment. One walks into a room and immediately demands respect. He needs recognition, he needs authority, he needs everyone to know that he's in charge. The second man enters quietly, confident, grounded, unshaken. He doesn't need everyone to know he's strong because he already knows. Which one is actually powerful there, do you think? The first man depends on what others think to feel powerful. The second man doesn't. That's the difference. So why does power corrupt so many people? Lord Acton, he famously said power tends to corrupt, and while there's truth there, I think there's something deeper. Power reveals, power exposes. Power magnifies what's already inside of you. If pride is inside of you, power is going to amplify it. If insecurity is inside you, power amplifies it. If selfishness is inside of you, power is going to amplify it. This is why character matters so much more than influence. And this is also the difference between kings and tyrants. History is full of powerful men, but very few great men. The difference is simple. A tyrant uses power for himself. A king uses power for his people. One takes, one gives. One assumes, one serves. One demands, while the other makes sacrifices. That's why Jesus is called king. Not because he conquered everyone, but because he gave himself away. There's this crisis of leadership in our time, I think. You know, it's one of the biggest problems today, and it's that we've confused dominance with leadership. We admire loudness, aggression, control, influence, status. But those things, they don't necessarily indicate leadership. In fact, some of the strongest leaders you'll ever meet are remarkably calm. They don't need attention. They don't need validation. They don't need to dominate every room. They simply know who they are, and they use whatever authority they have to serve those around them. So what does real masculine power then look like? Well, I would argue that it looks like being able to control yourself, being able to remain calm under pressure, being able to tell the truth when it's costly, being able to protect people who cannot protect themselves, being able to sacrifice your own comfort for someone else's good, being able to remain faithful when compromise would be easier. That's strength. Not domination, not intimidation, not control. Strength. So remember what this series is about. Bearing the image of God. What does God do with his power? We see that he creates, he protects, he provides, he restores, he serves, he gives. That's the image we were meant to reflect. Not power for power's sake, but power directed by love, authority guided by humility, strength submitted to God. So the better question, most men, they ask, how can I become more powerful? But the kingdom asks a different question. What will I do with the power I've already been given? Your strength, your influence, your resources, your talents, your leadership, your time. Will they point toward yourself, or will they point towards God? That's the real question. So the goal of your life is not to become more powerful. The goal of your life is not to dominate. It's not to make everyone listen to you. The goal of your life is simply to bear the image of God, to become the kind of man who can be trusted with power because he is no longer controlled by it. The world teaches men to seek authority. Christ teaches men to seek faithfulness. And one day, those faithful men are entrusted with true authority. Any man can use power to serve himself. Only a king uses his power to serve others.